Great Lakes Prepping here. In this video, I'll be unboxing and reviewing my brand new Wüsthof 6-inch prep knife. I do a lot of cooking and food prep, but I've been using mid-grade chef knives since pretty much forever. So I decided to upgrade a little bit, and I set out to find a great new knife. There are so many options out there for quality cutlery, and I spent a lot of time deciding on which knife to spend my hard-earned money on. And I'll say right off the bat that while researching what kind of knife to buy, I attempted to watch many reviews on many different chef knives, and I was very disappointed to find video after video of someone basically standing there, holding up a knife, and listing all of the features, while never actually showing the thing chopping, slicing, mincing, or anything of the sort. I can read the knife's tech specs and features on its product page or manufacturer's website. I want to see the thing in action and hear why you bought it and how you like it after having used it. So in my kitchen knife review video, I decided to show almost entirely footage of me using the knife, and I'll just talk over top of it. Cause let's be honest, you'd rather watch this knife chopping vegetables than stare at my ugly mug for the next 7 or 10 minutes. So for the last couple weeks since I got the knife, I've made sure the camera was rolling anytime I had to cut something up. Anyhow, let's get into it. There's sort of two top level categories of knife that I'm thinking about when it comes to chef knives: European and Japanese. Ask a few professional chefs what kind of knife they use, and you're almost certain to hear the brands Wüsthof and Zwilling-Henkels. Both are absolute mainstays of professional kitchens and have been for generations, Wüsthof being founded in 1814 and Henkels going all the way back to 1731. Wüsthof and Zwilling-Henkels are considered European-style cutlery, which makes sense considering they're both German companies. These brands are known to be reliable old workhorses in the culinary world. They come super sharp and hold a very good edge. They're just durable, sharp knives known for quality and longevity. Everything I read about the classic Wüsthof and Henkels knives are that they can take a lot of abuse and still hold a great edge. People keep and use these knives for decades and even pass them down to their children. Pretty early on, I was leaning towards one of these two brands. But the thing is, I really like the Santoku style knives. Both Wüsthof and Henkels make Santoku style knives, but it's a Japanese style, so I figured I ought to consider a Japanese manufacturer. While those old German workhorse brands have been considered tried and true for decades, there seem to be a lot of Japanese cutlery brands out there that don't necessarily have the same reputation. Or I should say, I haven't been able to find nearly as much about any long-term reputation with regards to professional chefs in the United States. I'm not trying to say that there aren't Japanese knife brands that enjoy a great reputation going back a very long time. I just didn't have a lot of luck identifying them. Let me put it another way. One of the main things I sought out was information about which knives professional chefs personally use. Since I only speak English, my reading was limited to English articles. That automatically makes it more likely that the materials I read are going to be about Western chefs who cook Western food. And I constantly read about chefs who personally use Wüsthof or Henkels knives. There certainly were other brands, including lots of Japanese brands, but those Japanese brands were a bit all over the place. There weren't one or two brands that always seemed present in these chefs' personal recommendations. Nevertheless, I researched further. I actually really liked the looks of a Santoku knife by a brand called Mac. These knives are apparently made by Japanese craftsmen and come highly recommended by those who prefer Japanese cutlery. They are said to be sharper than many other brands, including the common European brands. But when I read further, I learned that the carbon steel used in many of these knives, including the Mac knives, apparently make the blade more brittle and sensitive to things like chipping and even corrosion. To be honest, I'm pretty hard on my tools. I know enough about myself to know that I'm not going to be interested in a strict maintenance regimen for my chef's knife. Higher-end Japanese knives seem to require a higher level of care and maintenance than I am comfortable committing to. But as I mentioned, a knife like the Wüsthof is said to be a workhorse that can stand up to the abuse of a busy commercial kitchen or amateur chef. In the end, that was a big deciding factor for me. I want something that a lot of professionals rely on for being durable and functional above all else. I know Glocks aren't the best or prettiest pistols on the market, but they're tried and true and are very good at doing the thing they're meant to do, irrespective of most outside factors. That's why I like Glocks, and that's why I decided to go with either a Wüsthof or a Zwilling Henkel's chef knife. Now, the Wüsthof and Henkel's have a lot of similarities. Their classic chef knives look almost the same. There are subtle differences, but they're pretty much right on the same level. Both brands make many variations in styles. They both have their classic butcher style knife, as well as various other model lines of the butcher style chef knife. They both have various Santoku style knives, boning knives, and all sorts of other common types. But I already know I want something along the lines of a Santoku. After going back and forth a lot, I decided on Wüsthof over Henkel's. I think I like their handles just slightly more, and their reputation among professional chefs seemed to be a bit more ubiquitous. I also decided I wanted something from their classic model lineup as my first professional knife. I want the experience that pros have had for the last several decades, and the classic Wüsthof design is where it's at. That being said, I realized that I would need to go with the classic 8-inch chef knife to truly get the legit, quote, pro chef experience, but as I mentioned, I really like the Santoku style of blade, so that's what I expected to end up buying. But then I came upon this knife, the knife right here that I'm using in this video, which isn't actually a Santoku. While somewhat Santoku shaped, it's actually called the Wüsthof 6-inch prep knife. The edge rounds slightly near the tip, which allows for rock chopping a bit better than a mostly straight Santoku. In that regard, this thing is a bit of a hybrid between a classic chef knife and a Santoku, except, of course, for the fact that it's a bit shorter than either. While classic chef knives are generally 8 inches and classic Santokus are generally 7 inches, this prep knife is only 6 inches in blade length. I'm pretty used to my 7-inch Santoku knives, so this was the only sticking point for me. Other than that, I loved the look of the knife, and all the specs were just as impressive as any of the knives in Wüsthof's classic lineup. But being that it's slightly shorter, it also means that the price is slightly less. And for a relatively expensive professional chef's knife that I really have zero experience with, that slightly lower price ended up being one of the deciding factors. Also, unlike pretty much every Santoku knife, this prep knife does not have a hollow edge blade. A hollow edge blade is one that has evenly spaced indentations or hollows along the length of the blade. These are useful to keep slices of food from sticking to the blade while cutting. All of my Santoku knives have had this hollow edge, and I was interested in trying one that didn't, and this prep knife doesn't. So now that I've taken you through the whole life story of how I ended up with this particular model of this particular knife, let me now tell you my impressions of it after having used it for a couple weeks. First and foremost, this thing is really sharp. I'd expect it to be super sharp, but I can tell you that it is the sharpest kitchen knife I've ever used out of the box. It's cut through everything I've asked it to with absolute ease, and after 2 weeks, it seems just as sharp as day one. And being that we're getting into soup season, I can tell you that I've cut up a lot of meat and vegetables in the last 2 weeks. The classic Wüsthof handle is fine, but I will admit that it's not my favorite. It seems just a little small in my hand, though I do have somewhat large hands and long gangly fingers. It may be that I'm just used to the thicker wood handle of my old 2-0 Santoku knife. I will mention that Wüsthof has come out with a somewhat recent newer line of knives that have an updated handle that's more along the lines of my older Santoku. The Wüsthof Icon series has a thicker, rounded, contoured handle that I really like the looks of. This knife is well balanced, but almost feels a bit too light. I've read about how some people don't like these old European workhorse knives because they tend to be on the heavier side, but I'm definitely not feeling that. Once again, it's probably just my brain and hand being used to my previous knives, which had heavier handles and cheaper, possibly heavier metal. And while I have absolutely no difficulty in slicing, chopping, or mincing anything with this Wüsthof prep knife, I will say that I am missing that extra inch. It's probably just because I've used a 7-inch knife for almost everything for the last probably 15 years. But I have a hard time with change, and I do sort of wish I just went with a 7-inch Santoku. To add to that, I talked about the hollow edge that is found on Santoku knives and how this prep knife does not have a hollow edge blade. Well, I actually do miss having that. Vegetable slices, particularly larger, wetter vegetables, are sticking to the side of this blade notably worse than with my old Santokus. I definitely took that feature for granted, and once again, I sort of wish I'd just gone with the Wüsthof Santoku. Lastly, the curved blade didn't end up seeming as useful to me as I thought it might be. I've been chopping with a mostly straight Santoku for so long, I don't think my technique is suited to the curved blade rock chopping method that this blade is made for. But these are the sort of things that you wouldn't know if you didn't know. I'm absolutely thrilled with the quality and function of this knife, but I have definitely identified a couple areas in which this isn't the perfect model for me. All in all, I'm fully impressed with Wüsthof, and any complaints I have about this model can be described as feature preferences rather than any actual criticism of the product itself. This has absolutely become my primary kitchen knife now, but I will say that I'm already thinking about buying my next one. Considering my experience and feedback with the 6-inch classic prep knife, I'm quite certain that my next purchase will be the Wüsthof Icon 7-inch Santoku knife. So that's it for now. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future product reviews. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.